Stanton, hey, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Happy Friday.
Thank you for having me. Happy Friday.
Of course, awesome. Really excited for this episode of the Inflow Experience podcast. Excited to, obviously talk about your role and what you do and get into some good topics. But I always like to start these episodes off with a little bit about the person and throw a little curveball question at you. I guess maybe you can look at it that way. But I want to know a little bit about, before Inflow, before maybe even your last job. Think back to when you first started your career, and maybe not even your career, but just your first job. What was it, and what did you learn from it? What did you take away from it?
I mean, my first job that I ever got a paycheck for was on an egg farm in Idaho. But, my first job out of college, kind of getting into my career field, was at Quest. I was doing pricing for the sales teams there. Trying to make sure that we were at that sweet point where we could get the deal closed, but we weren't giving away the company.
Okay, cool. Awesome. What do you think, you took away from that? But I don't even want to know about that one. I want to learn about the egg farm a little bit. What do you think you learned most about working at an egg farm?
What I learned most about working at an egg farm is sometimes life is the way it is, and you can't change it. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is. It doesn't matter how you're feeling. The chickens need to be taken care of. The eggs need to be collected, and work's work. You got to get it done.
Oh man, that is great. I'm glad you got to learn that lesson early, because I feel like sometimes I still learn that lesson every day, right? So that's awesome, man. Well, cool. So don't work at an egg farm anymore, obviously. You're here at InflowCX, and we're happy about that. But I want you, for the audience, just to give a little brief synopsis, maybe 2 minutes on title, your role, and how you work with Inflow, how you work with our customers, and things like that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So by title, I'm Senior Director of Consulting Services at Inflow. And what that means is really I help lead and run a lot of these consulting engagements that we do, vendor agnostic consulting. So companies that they know they need to either make the move to the cloud, or maybe they've already adopted a cloud platform previously, but it's not quite fulfilling their needs, to help them find a vendor and solution that will, to be able to really deep dive with them, discover what the requirements are, what their business needs to succeed to enable their customers to have the best experience possible, and help them with that technology selection and walk down that path.
Okay, awesome. Great. Very cool. So I imagine you talk to a lot of different contact centers and a lot of different people within those contact centers, and it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, in your experience, when you're working with a contact center on trying to either make that, shift to the cloud, or even, like you said, evaluating different products, different solutions on how to enhance that. I want to talk a little bit about personas, because, within a contact center, I think there are so many people that are involved in that process. And, I'm curious if you find any kind of consistency in your most effective contact centers. Who's making the decision about the technology? Is it IT? Is it contact center? Is it driven by finance? Is it a combo of a bunch of people? What's the thoughts on that?
Yeah, so they all have a hand in it. At the most successful contact centers, everybody's involved to a certain degree, and everybody's on the same page with the project. That being said, there are some people who clearly take a heavier role in the process, and I'd say that's shifted from where it traditionally was. More with IT previous. Now it's the business users. It's the aspect of the business that focuses on customer experience, customer success, as they're able to delineate what the needs are for their agents, for their customers. We can match them up with a technology that really performs the way that they need to highlight that success for them.
Awesome. What do you think is driving that change from, it'd be traditionally IT, doing the evaluation and having the heaviest hand in it, if you will, to, that shift to the business users, understanding that?
I think a big part of that has to do with the shift to the cloud. Okay. Previously, the IT teams would pick a platform that they felt would, probably fulfill the need of the business really well, but the IT team could maintain and administer that platform. When they've got all that on-premise equipment, and that's the environment that they're in, IT needs to absolutely know what's going on and to be able to manage that. That being said, that creates a layer between the contact center and the needs of the business users. By moving to the
Okay.
cloud now, it kind of hands the keys of the kingdom over to the business users, where it becomes easy for them to administer and manage the contact center. IT helps, but more in a periphery role. And they're able to focus on other aspects of the business where their resources are more needed and more valuable at that time. And this allows the business users of the contact center to really have the power to manage the contact center as best fits their need.
So it's almost, specialization. I talk about it a lot on sales teams. You've got to have role differentiation between like a CSM and a salesperson who's responsible for getting new customers versus nurturing the relationship of your current customers. It's just two different skill sets and personalities. And when you can attribute, one person to just focus on one thing, you typically see that better. So is that kind of the same principle, it sounds like, in, having the business users make the contact center decision is like, hey, contact center, what you need to be successful. Let's empower you to, have more of a hand in that decision, have IT support, but, ultimately work collaboratively on it, but let them focus on what they really are better and really need to be focused on as well.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that. Previous, the need to understand the technology and the administration of the technology was the barrier to entry for the business users. Now that's largely removed.
Okay. Interesting. So, I think sometimes in contact center, we think about it being like you just talked about, right? A lot of people are in the decision-making process in that. And ultimately, those people might have different objectives sometimes, right? IT may care about one thing or have one set of priorities. Business users might have a different one. Finance might have something completely different. And your most successful contact centers that are making a transformation like this, are there any commonalities or successful strategies in just getting everyone aligned and understanding that, hey, we all have the same goal here. We just got to agree on how to get there?
Absolutely. I think the biggest piece of that, of getting everyone aligned, is to have an organizational paradigm shift where IT acts in almost an advisory role to the business. That as contact center solutions are being evaluated, that they're there to validate if there are any pitfalls or discrepancies or anywhere where they think an integration might not work properly, that they're able to talk through that with the technical side of the vendor partner, rather than them being an active decision maker in the process. They're there to support the business side.
Okay, so hey, here's why this could work. Here's why this couldn't work. Here's some of the potential pitfalls, and helping lift the project and really, in a sense, drive it, versus having a back and forth or some sort of battle, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, we talk a little bit about IT versus contact center, and one of the things that I know comes up a lot in businesses that are making a cloud transformation, and maybe it's across the whole organization. We're talking a lot about contact center, but you've also got unified communications, which is obviously a big part of a cloud shift today. You've got customer experience technologies and all of these things out here. If at an organization, do you think those things should all be viewed separately, tackled one at a time? Do you think it makes sense to look at it as one large digital transformation? What are your thoughts on that?
There are a lot of interdependencies in these systems. Typically, what I see works the best is to tackle one at a time, but in close succession with one another. So, for example, perhaps first the cloud contact center itself, get that platform decided on, get it deployed, get it up and running. As we're getting to the end stages of that project, then tackle the UC and tie that into the contact center. And then, as you mentioned, the periphery technologies that layer on top of that, some of the more advanced levels of analytics and automation within the contact center, to put those on as the final icing on the cake.
Yeah, I know that analytics, and there's probably a whole episode we can do just on that. When you talk a little bit about analytics and some of those more advanced features, what are some of the really common but a super impactful types of technologies that you're seeing, being seriously evaluated and making a big difference for contact centers today?
A huge one is the ability for self-service in simple interactions. I've heard so many times from so many different companies that one of their top use cases is letting customers know their order status, so that if I'm the customer, I call in, that I can say, hey, what's my order status? Or even that it can do a lookup and say, all right, based on my phone number and based on the fact that I have an open order, it can say, are you calling about the order that you placed? I can say yes, and it will say your order is, it was shipped yesterday, and give me that. And I'm pleased, I'm happy, I got what I needed. It didn't take very long. And an agent in the contact center didn't need to be tied up on that call. They can be helping a customer who has an issue that requires more human touch.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So it's kind of creating a win for, the customer, because as, the end customer, I'm like, oh man, I know I'm gonna have to make this call just to get my order status. It might take an hour. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm pleasantly surprised when it takes, a minute and a half or 2 minutes. The, company is happy because an agent didn't have to spend time, taking that call, and ultimately it works out for them too. So I agree. I think that anytime I call, and, I'm sure you've experienced it before, when you call and you're going to talk to a bot, but it's a really good bot, in my opinion, I'm like, man, this is better than talking to a live person. This is great. I punch in exactly what I need and get to resolution quickly. So from a customer's perspective, I think I agree with that. I'm really excited to see, where those types of technology go in the next even 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and I mean, it's already made leaps and bounds from where it was even 2 years ago. To the point that I don't think a lot of people realize what's available out there. Just a couple of months ago, I needed to call in to place an order for something to a company. I called up, and I knew it was a bot, but it didn't have that robotic kind of voice. It was pleasant, and I placed my order for 2 different things, and I said, oh, hold on, I need to change something about the first one, made the change, and the bot repeated back to me exactly what I had ordered, what I had done. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes, and
wow.
I did it all through the IVR. And I actually hung up, and I told my wife, that was an amazing experience. I've never had one that good.
That is cool. Well, too bad who knows if the company could track somehow how, when you place that order, who it was and stuff, they could, get a little shout out on here and know that they're doing a great job.
Yeah. That was, when I ordered a Domino's pizza a couple months ago, actually.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Awesome. Good stuff. Got to get the good Domino's in. One of the other, questions I had for you around just contact center personnel, going back to our first part of the conversation was, so today you mentioned IT, business users. There's a lot of different hands in the pot. We talked a little bit about integrating all the different types of technologies, and how those integrate and interact with one another. Do you see a world in, the near future where CMOs, or maybe even, CCO, like a chief customer officer, have a big part of the decision, around just contact center and customer experience technology, or even is that already happening?
Without a doubt, that is happening already in these instances. And like you just mentioned, there's so much data that can be gathered now through these advanced analytic tools, data that previously had just been sitting there unused, call recordings of every interaction with the customer that, a handful of them are chosen to be listened to, whereas now every single one of them can be analyzed. And that type of market research that previously would have had to put a lot of time and money into to do that, you're getting it from your customers already every time that they interact with you. And so for those customer experience officers, those marketing officers to be able to dig into that treasure trove of data to see how they can tweak things within their business. Maybe they run certain promotional campaigns and they can search by keyword. They can search by, how soon after an interaction a customer made a decision or didn't make a decision. And they can see very much in real time or near real time how it's moving the needle. If the small tweaks that they're changing are making a positive difference in the contact center.
Interesting. So you're really taking, like you said, data that's always been there in the contact center, and you're able through, call analytics is what we're talking about here, able to empower not only the business users, but, other departments in the company to ultimately help, the organization, do whatever they need to do, right? Have a better customer experience, like you said, the promotional campaigns and kind of revenue generation, which I think is a really interesting thing to think about when you are a contact center looking to make a change, right? I know that there are some companies out there when they're looking to potentially make a shift, maybe take that into consideration, right? And one of my questions to you is, if I'm an organization that's looking to make a shift in my contact center technology, how much, if any, of a factor can potential or possible new sales or revenue generation factor into like the ROI or total cost of ownership of a new system?
That's a great question. One of the things that we have on our side in the consulting part of the business here is an ROI model that we use to help clients evaluate these solutions, to say, all right, where are you at now? What are your current costs? Both from a technology and a personnel perspective. What do your revenues look like? What are your call metrics like? And then we have various levers that we can pull to say, all right, if this, then that. Based on the average value of a sale and your close rate on contact, if we can increase your contact rate, then we can directly tie that back in a metric-based way to increase revenues. Or, on the flip side, from a cost savings perspective, perhaps through some of this automation, now we've got 15% call deflection, or maybe you can shave 12 seconds off your average handle time of a call. It may not seem like a lot, but it adds up over the course of the contact center. That leads to real reductions. That means that you can service the same number of customers in just as good or even a better way with fewer agents.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're right. And you'd say, 12 seconds on a call, what's the big deal there? But you think of how many calls one agent has in a day and then multiply that by like thousands of agents, right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, that is a lot of time.
That's one of the most common reactions that I have when talking about the ROI with customers. When they give me their data, I do a preliminary pass through it, and I come back and I say, all right, based on this, if you want to have a cost neutral solution, we're looking at shaving off 18 seconds of average handle time. And they say, wait, that's it? And I said,
wow.
Yeah. And we can show exactly how that can be done, Whereas, for example, a common instance is a caller calls in, the agent has to authenticate them, has to look them up in a system, whereas now we can have the caller get pre-authenticated and we get screen pops of the customer record for the agent as soon as the call comes in. That right there saves time on the interaction.
Wow. So I call in, and instead of please enter your social, please enter your date of birth, all this other stuff, it's, hey, Mr. Culp, how you doing today?
Yeah, there are ways of validating you before you even get to an agent.
Wow, that's really cool. That is awesome. So, talking a little bit more too about the revenue generation piece and factoring that into ROI, I think that's really great. Are you seeing, contact centers become less of a cost center like they, have historically been, and more of revenue generation or, like a driver for an organization?
I'd say there's a difference between on paper and in practice.
Okay.
And let me explain what I mean by that. When we're doing evaluations of contact center technology and they come up on who they want to choose for their new vendor platform, and they take it to the executive team. We help them prepare whatever presentations or documents or financial one-pagers they might need for that. I find that it's infinitely easier for them to say, all right, based on the ROI model, we can have a cost-neutral change to this new technology by reducing cost. Now, there is a potential for upside in revenue, just so that you're aware of that. And that's typically the way that it goes. Now, in practice, does that upside in revenue come? Certainly, it absolutely can. But do people want to step up to it from the outset by saying, hey, I promise I'm going to increase sales 4% if you give me this new contact center? We don't see that happen too often.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a big ask. I can imagine there's not a ton of sales leaders or even contact center leaders that are raising their hand to volunteer for that one.
But the good news is as we're going through those discussions, there are times where those sales leaders are involved in these conversations and they see the value. And while they don't want to put a hard commitment on their ability to generate increased revenues as a result of this, what they can do is become an ally with the business users and an advocate for the change in technology to the executive team.
Got it. So it sounds like it's a really powerful way for the business users to gain another internal champion or supporter of the project.
Absolutely. Projects like this, when they're done in the right way, when you get all the people on board and everyone understands their role and they collaborate on the approach, it unites disparate parts of the organization like I rarely see in other business initiatives.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I know we've talked a lot about different personas, different people, how they all work together, and I know a big part of a contact center evaluation is the ROI, the TCO, making sure that you're making the right decision. I also know that there are a lot of great technologies out there, and how they bill and how they charge are a lot different. And I know it can be a challenge for organizations sometimes when you're looking at 2 or 3 or several different technologies to potentially move to, and everything's just priced differently. Maybe it's all in one, maybe it's per line item. Do you have a way to kind of help a customer digest that, and get it as close as apples to apples as it can be?
Certainly, both on the financial piece as well as the functionality piece. From the financial side, to your point, they bill differently. Some might have one line item and it says, this is the bundle that has everything. Others might break it out into 10 different line items. We help the customer break this out to see, all right, tit for tat, here's what this means. Here's where it lines up. Here's how you're getting good value, or you might be able to get better value out of one piece or another, and help do that apples to apples financial comparison. From a functionality perspective, honestly, there's so many good solutions out there right now. I feel like, if you pick any of the top 5 or 6 contact center vendors, their solution could probably fit 85 to 90% plus of people's business needs. Where it really comes into play is finding that last 10 to 15% to make sure that they get the best fit. In this, when you're looking for what's going to ultimately fulfill the business need in the best way possible, there needs to be a qualitative and a quantitative approach to how vendors are evaluated. So that's another piece that we use on the consulting side is we have a weighted scorecard, where vendors can be evaluated based on their demos, based on their functionality. Everybody does certain things in slightly different ways, and what might be good for one business isn't always necessarily top priority for another. This allows us to have an objective analysis to say, all right, I know that demo was really cool, but looking at the numbers, looking at the scorecard, perhaps this one edges them out just a little bit. Obviously, in a perfect world, we always have the best demos with the best salespeople, and it's the best technology. But we understand that sometimes those don't always align, and it's good to be able to take the emotional aspect out of a decision, especially as impactful as changing a contact center. I mean, the contact center is the way that businesses primarily interact with their customers. That's why we all do what we do, because we have customers. And it doesn't matter if we have the neatest tool in the world. If it's not providing value to someone else, what good is it?
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it. I totally get that. That's awesome. Okay, cool. So, Stan, we've talked a lot about, about pricing and ROI and, how to make that final step in the contact center. But, one of the last questions I had for you is how do you help a customer think about the complete ROI picture, right? Not just, hey, here's what we're paying today and here's what we'll be paying on the new platform, but all that stuff in the middle that is different just from the list price. How do you help a customer really make sure they're taking all that into consideration, and what are some of those most common factors?
Yeah, so there's always going to be transition period. It's not like you're going to turn off your one system and turn on the new one immediately with the snap of a finger, and here you are ready to go. One thing that we do is we often build in a ramp period where there's a certain number of months where we say, all right, here's the type of cost that you're going to be having with the new solution as it gets implemented across certain groups within the contact center, and here's the benefit you might receive from it. We layer in things such as when existing contracts end. Sometimes there's overlap. And I try to be as conservative as possible in every ROI analysis that I do of a contact center, to make sure that we've got that ramp period, that we've got the transition time, that we know when things are going to fall off, and we're not going to hit max benefit on day one. It's unrealistic to think that just because you flip the switch that now every agent in the contact center is going to know how to use it with 100% effectiveness. It takes time.
Yeah, I wish everything worked like that. You learn something, and then the next day you're a master of it. That'd make for a much easier life, I guess. Well, last question, and then we'll let you get out of here, Stan. I like to close this one. Close out the podcast episodes with this one, and I really want you to think about the contact center and or customer experience ecosystem. And we've talked a lot about advancements and kind of where the market's going, but what are you most excited about, or what do you think will have the biggest impact on contact center / CX in the next 3 to 5 years, and why do you think it'll have such a large impact?
I think automation done right. Well, automation period, I think, will have the largest impact. Positive impact is if it's done the right way, because we've all had experiences where we've spoken to a bot and it feels like you're just stuck in a loop on the phone with this bot, and it's one of the most frustrating customer experiences you can have. On the other hand, like I related earlier, sometimes you hang up and you say, that was amazing. I've never had a call like that. And if automation can be done in the right way, can get implemented in a way that meets the customer needs, that's of tantamount importance within these contact center businesses. It's easy to get distracted with dollar signs here and there, or with neat functionality and use cases. But at the end of the day, it all needs to tie back to the customer need. Is the customer better off having interacted with your contact center? And if you can implement these technologies in a way that they say, yes, that's where companies are going to rise above the others.
Awesome. That is great. Man, that was really, really insightful, and I cannot believe we're already, almost 30 minutes in here. That was a awesome conversation. I really, really appreciate the insight, and thank you so much for joining me, man, and for all you do for InflowCX and our customer and this space. No,
thank you. I appreciate you having me on here with you. It's been great.
Anytime. And any advice for, you see, I've got the bare lip going on here. I actually was trying to grow out a mustache, and then I remembered that I was on with you today, and I was like, there's just zero chance I can even go up and be side by side with Stanton.
Growing a mustache is like many things in life. There's never a right time for it. You just got to decide to do it. And for the first few months, you might have some growing pains where people say, "Oh God, what the heck is that?" But after a while, it works out.
Yeah, clearly, man. Clearly, I'm very envious. I will have to do that. Awesome, Stanton. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Austin.